Hello, this is Edward Dumancas, Wing Wing Chun. Today, I will be interviewing Chaz Fisher of the Real Wing Chun Kung Fu School in Seattle. Let me get him over. Just 1 minute. Hello, Sifu Chaz.
Hey, Ed.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you. Sorry for the delay.
No worries.
Where are you? Are you in a bedroom?
I am, hold on a second. I am in a little room off of my bedroom. My improvised home office.
No, I did have one. Then my wife says it's a couple's cave, and I'm not too sure what that really means, but I don't actually spend any time in there.
You don't have to know anything, but that she's right.
That's right. Oh, so how are you doing in all of this?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. My business is still operating at pretty much at full throttle, although most of us are working from home. And I'm in the business of knives, so a lot of people want knives these days, right? Because you know they think they're in a Walking Dead episode. They think they need lots of machetes and stuff like that.
I'll have to get a look at your. You must have a catalog then.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of stuff. I'll shoot you some stuff if you want to try it out.
Yeah, because I have a good friend that actually has his own knife business. He makes them from scratch, I guess. You know, he does all the pounding, and I have no clue.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and he keeps thinking I need more. You know, he keeps sending me more photos.
Yeah, and he's right.
Yeah, I suppose. You know, you can only hold so many in your hand. So, yeah. Okay. So anyway, how about your school? How's your school doing?
Well, you know, I'm not operating classes right now, and we did right up until when the governor issued his thing, and then we stopped because I thought it was probably good thinking. I have been reviewing videos that my guys send me and then sending them back feedback. And I'm working on setting up a space where I can actually, you know, have, you know, a bit set the camera set a bit further back from me so that I can do classes on Zoom. But I haven't quite set that up yet.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I can't do it at the school because I don't have Wi-Fi at the school, but so I'll have to find a place around the house to do it.
I am in the same situation. I do not have Wi-Fi at the studio. So, and I've gone through the live streaming, and it was a guy like me who, you know, I don't do this online stuff at all, so I'm not good at it. And we ran into our very first live streaming. We had a few characters that got themselves in.
Yeah, I've heard about those people. Yeah.
Yeah, and drawing photos of things, and needless to say, I mean, now when I look back, that's like 2 weeks ago. It's funny, but at the moment, I'm like, what do I do? And luckily, I do have a few people that are in this kind of business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we had was we end up having one that went ahead and handled everything on the back end, and all I did was speak and do some movement. So
cool.
So anyway, you know, I'm very interested, and not just myself. I'm sure there's a lot of people who'd like to know a little bit more about you. So when did you actually begin your martial arts journey? When did that start?
I was about 11, which would have put it in about 74.
Oh, yes.
And of course, I'd seen a Bruce Lee movie. I think it was Enter the Dragon. And, you know, I was 11. It's like, wow, what is that? And that pretty much sparked the interest that still is there today, right? The fascination. It's even deeper than interest. It's I mean, I still think, wow, when I watch people who are good, and it just touches something in me that, and it did then, that I just I had to explore, right? So I was about 11, and I didn't know anything, of course, because I lived in rural Colorado, and uh, talked my parents into finding a studio, any studio, didn't matter what it was, in the nearby town that had more population. And I don't even know what it was at the time. It was some sort of Taekwondo thing, and some sort of blended thing, I think. And I did that for a couple of years, and to me, it was awesome. It was cool, and it was a great outlet for me to explore it. And took a little bit of a break until high school. And then in high school, found myself in a bigger town, and access to a little bit more, and got into Taekwondo, a real, Taekwondo school. I did that for probably 3 years, and it was good for me for the time. And during that time, I did more research into what Bruce Lee was all about, and what all the other arts were that were available to us. And that is when I really came to the idea that I had to do Wing Chun, but I couldn't find it where I was. So I just kept on looking, and every time I'd move, every few years I'd move, either through university or after university, and my first jobs. One of the first things I would do when I moved to a place is see if they had Wing Chun in the city. And finally, in my early 30s, I came to a place in my life where I needed to do something, and I found a real Wing Chun school. So that was in Denver.
In your 30s, and that's quite some time ago.
Yeah, so I was like out of training entirely for more than 10 years. I did other stuff in that 10 years. I devoted myself to some other pursuits, physical pursuits, which were I was hyper focused on. So it kept me pretty distracted. And then I think I was about 31 is when I discovered that school in Colorado.
So today, do you teach primarily Wing Chun?
Oh yeah, just Wing Chun. So I came up in that school in Colorado. During that time, after a few years there, I started looking at some other things, and another Sifu rolled into town who was using our space. And his main system was Fucho White Crane, a family white crane. And I was one of his first students within that school as well. He did some other things. He had done some Shaolin, he'd done some Tai Chol, he'd done some Hongga. And so he kind of put me on this, full palette of things that he did. But the thing that really interested me with his art was Fucho White Crane. So I pretty much went into with him, Fucho White Crane, and with my Wing Chun Sifu Wing Chun. And I trained probably 6 days a week, 3 in one and 3 in the other.
But today, you primarily teach Wing Chun.
Primarily, I teach Wing Chun. I teach White Crane to some of my most senior students.
Does the White Crane? I'm guessing they must have a few sets that they practice.
Yeah, they have. We have 12 sets in our system.
Wow! So you have the 3 Wing Chun sets, open hand sets, and then you have 12 of the White Crane. So that's 15 that you still practice then.
Yeah, there are a lot of the crane that I don't get to do a lot. So I do maybe the first 4 pretty heavily with the guys that I train with. But yeah, Wing Chun's the Wing Chun is what we do mainly at the school.
What lineage of Wing Chun do you teach?
It's Yip Man.
Yip Man.
Yip Man to Duncan Leung to Jerry Gardner to Bart Mann, who is my Sifu.
Duncan Leung. Wow. And so your students, when they come to you, they are in seek of Wing Chun.
Yeah.
Do you as an instructor, do you find yourself, because you have a vast amount of experience, right? There's a sense there's a Japanese art somewhere in your history. There's a Korean art in your history. Definitely the Chinese arts are in your history. So when you now, but as an instructor, do you find yourself a traditionalist in the sense that what you teach is primarily how you were trained, or do you find yourself more of a progressive of instructor versus what you may have learned in the past?
That's a super interesting question. I think my instinct is to say that I'm a traditionalist because I don't change or reshape any of the stuff that I was given by either of my Sifus, you know, my Crane or my Wing Chun Sifu. So when I'm teaching Crane, I'm teaching Crane. When I'm teaching Wing Chun, it's Wing Chun. So I don't modify anything. I use all of the traditional methods of training that I got coming up in the system. Both of those systems are very similar in how my Sifus taught me. You know, we did forms, we did lots of repetition. We suffered a lot. You know, all of those are fairly traditional methods used. And I think those are really valuable. I think there is a lot of value in the forms and in teaching the forms. There are a lot of modern guys who don't do that, but I think it's a mistake because it's a way to keep continuity through the generations. So we still work on those. And of course we do Chi Sao and a lot of the other, you know, well-known drills that Wing Chun uses. I'd say that I've built upon that traditional core by including some skills that some schools don't work on that really have more to do with just everyday being safe in an everyday sense in the world. Right, we do a lot of tactical behavioral stuff, tactical awareness, situational awareness. Tactical behaviors that will position you to be able to make better decisions, to make faster decisions. And so we work on those a fair bit too. And those require drilling just like, Lapsao requires drilling.
Yeah, I find, actually, it's hard to say now because a lot of, I think people's perception has a lot more to do with what they see on the web.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a strong distraction leading people outside a traditional form of practice. And I think there's a lot to be gained, you know, like the very progressive, or now you might even consider it more of the MMA environment.
Mm-hmm.
I would not, even with the training that I had, I would not, that would be the last thing I'd want my grandson to do. My grandson's 7 years old, right? And I think there's a lot to be learned in a class that teaches not just the traditional movements, but there's a lot to be said on how you just learn these mannerisms that you gain from everyone else that's been there, because there's this expectation rather than going into an environment which is very much today where everyone's got to be the big strong guy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that one of the things that I got out of that traditional upbringing in the martial arts is a strong sense of humility, that no matter how good I might think I was in a moment of doing a drill with one of my training partners, I always knew that there was somebody who was far better than I was, and that people who came before me were far better than I was at the time, and that just kept me humble. And Sifu helped, right? Anytime anything went to anybody's head, he'd knock it out of it, almost immediately.
Yeah.
And there's value to that. There's value to humility in life, not just in dealing with dangerous situations in the street. And then it gave me a sense of composure in moments of stress that I don't know that you get with those progressive newer ways of training. And don't get me wrong, those, some of those MMA guys are absolutely amazing. They can, they're tough as hell. And, honestly, I wouldn't want to try and hit them because they're pretty good at getting hit and taking it. But it's not all just about that. It's not all just about a ring and, X number of minutes in that ring. It's life out there. And I'm not to denigrate what they do and put what traditional practitioners do up on a pedestal, but I'm not training people to go into a ring, and I have no interest in going in a ring.
Yeah, good
So
point.
that's why I've gone the route that I have.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And it's funny. So it doesn't matter whether it's one of these progressive schools that encompasses, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, or a traditional school. No matter what school you go to, you will find, um, you will find a very small group in your school that will excel. It just it's just natural for them, and many other people uh, struggle. I look back, I don't remember myself, but I'm going to say I was one of those that struggled, and so um, I would not have been the one that would, like in the MMA group, would be the one that going out and getting into these big ring fights. I'd probably be the one getting beat up so the other guy can go into the ring, So, and you have them in all schools, and so I've always thought to myself, ultimately, what is the long-term goal, right? Because if she's 74, you were 11,
Yeah.
and then in 73 is when I started, and I was 7. So that means you're older than me,
I'm older
right?
than you, man.
Either way, so but what am I? What was I was going to say this? So okay, so but either way, what is the long-term goal? I mean, at our age,
Mm.
right? We are still training. We may not be training as much as we trained when we were in our 20s, but we're still training. And ultimately, I want that for the very next person, the person that walks through my door and they're, 15 years old or 18 or 30
Yeah.
or even 60
Yeah.
and thinking to themselves, I've passed my prime. Well, no, I still want you to be able to enjoy the uh, this environment that I love so much.
Yeah. Well, I have put a lot of thought into that, as I know you have. Being a teacher, and I've run the school here in Seattle for 15 or 16 years now, and it gives you that amount of time gives you some time to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I've come to really firmly believe that all of these skills that we teach people, that are these hard skills, and fundamentally how to hurt other people, right? That at least that's how it looks at a superficial glance. Those same skills and the acquisition of those skills gives you its own tool set with which to deal with life as a whole. And all of those same, I talk about principles with my guys all the time, these principles of combat. And those same principles can be used outside of combat in a non-combative context. I mean, I use them with my kids. My kids know how to get me off my ground better than anybody on the planet, right? So I better be good at getting back on my ground, be recentering myself metaphorically, right? Not physically.
Yeah.
They're not beating on me usually. So those skills and those tools that I've applied to life, that's what I've been trying to convey to my students. Because if all you're learning is how to hurt people, then I don't think, I wouldn't think I'm doing my job. My job isn't to teach people how to hurt people. For one thing, that's easy. And, you don't even need Kung Fu to do that. You can do that with a gun or with a knife, with a lot of other things. And so to me, it's so much deeper and wider than that. It's tools for life. So when I go into my school, in fact, every time I walk through the door, I remind myself why I'm doing it. And it's to help others reach their fullest potential in life. This is pretty broad, but I think that Kung Fu does that. I think Wing Chun does that. Many things could do that, but that's what I've chosen to do. That's the tool set that I've chosen to help people do that with.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I don't know if
No,
that.
it does. It does. It reminds me, and it's happened more than once, but there's one particular individual I will always remember, and it's because of what he offered. I mean, I've been offered a few times, to do one-on-one training, and I've always turned it down. But there was this one who offered a lot of money, and I'm like, why would you want to pay this kind of money for? And he said to me, this is about maybe over 15 years now, and he goes, well, I want to be as good as you. And I said to him, I said, I'm no good. I'm no good. I go, and if you think that I am the benchmark for you, you'll never reach your goal.
Yeah.
You know, and so you want to. So the best thing to do is, yes, of course, train with me, but there will be other people that you can train with that may push you even further to become even more than you can even expect of yourself. And ultimately, that's what we want, right? We want them to get to be better, and maybe one day continue on to school.
Yeah.
You know, so is there a certain size of school that you prefer? Like, is there a certain number that you might think is too big or too small?
Yeah, well, for sure. I try to keep my total number of students to about 20, maybe a few more. A few times I've grown beyond that, and you know, I don't keep physical notes of my students and where they are in their progression. You know, I just keep it in my head. I found that when I keep notes, it for one thing, it's so dynamic and changing. It changes all the time. You know, because some people progress really rapidly. It's actually easier for me to keep track of it in my head, and I just can't keep that many arcs of progression beyond about 20 people. I can't keep it all in my head because it's a three-dimensional arc. It's not like a graph on paper, right? There's so many different pieces of the puzzle that you're trying to build around a person as they get through the skill set. And, you know, each one is completely different in their acquisition of it. You know, some, you know, leap ahead and get one piece of the puzzle early, and, you know, it's kind of just waiting there ready to fall into place. And others, you know, you just got to build everything in perfect sequence. And so 20 is about the number that I've found I can best keep track of and give them good feedback as they progress.
That's funny. I have that's about the same number for myself. I have gotten it to where it's over 20. And while it may look good when someone walks in, even I am going, man, there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of energy. Ultimately, it really comes down to there's actually less of that one-on-one opportunity.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have someone who's struggling a bit that need a little bit more extra time or a little bit longer explanation than the others. So yeah, how true. Do you think after all this is done, because I was thinking about this today, you know, do you think after all this is done that there's going to be some long-term hardship on martial arts schools, being that there's a lot to say about our learning and the need for interaction with other people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, that's another good question. I don't know. I think people can have pretty short memories. If you go back in history and you look at the Spanish flu, which killed 50 million people worldwide, and if we had that same mortality rate with this thing, we'd have 250 million people dying, right? And we're nowhere close to the death impact, and not to diminish the heartache that many people are feeling with people who are affected by it, you know, and I don't want to do that. It is small in comparison to that. And boy, it didn't take long before those people in the 20s were just roaring back to their lives and doing stuff the way they'd always done stuff. And I think that it will not take long for us to get back to what we think is, you know, what we define as normal. And maybe it'll be a little bit different. Maybe we'll, you know, wash our hands more often, or just be more cognizant of who we're training with. And if they seem sick, you know, ask them to not train or something like that. I don't think in the long term, I don't think it's going to have a very big impact. I think we're going to get back to training, you know, close to what we were doing before. It might take a while. Yeah, it might take 6 months.
I never thought of it that way. And I mean, when I first thought of it today, I was like, geez, it might take a while, but I think we do have short-term memory. and 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 deep down inside, I think there's this, we just can't help ourselves. Each and every one of us are defiant in our own little way, right? And so the opportunity when we get to hear, oh, you can go back to work, which we need, but oh, you can go back and play and go back out to the mall, and all of a sudden it might just, you know, everybody just running crazy.
Yeah.
And we're back to normal.
Yeah.
uh, um, is there anything, do you think, is there anything unique about your school that might be different from other schools?
Oh, every school is unique in its own way, right? Because of the person who's really driving it from within. I'm sure your school is unique. Um, I think that, I mentioned I brought in, tactical training that I acquired a lot of that tactical training in some of the from a local school who does firearms training, actually, that I got into about 12 years ago, and they do tactical shooting courses, and it's called Insights Academy. They're still operating, not right now, but they're generally they're operating. It's run by Greg Hamilton, and those guys do an incredible job of teaching all of the tactical stuff that surrounds their skill, which has to do with firearms. And so I saw that, and I saw what the kind of success that Greg was having with his students. He had it with me as a student, and I thought that it would be a really great idea to do that in my school, to incorporate as much of that as I could within the context of Wing Chun, because Wing Chun is frankly, it's a set of tools that can be used to deal with bad situations. And so I don't know if it's unique. I'm sure that there are lots of Sifus out there who have had some tactical firearms training and understand those, that aspect of, of skills and why it's important. But I'd like to think that the way that I've done it and woven it into the regular Wing Chun training in a way that almost is inseparable. I mean, we do it every single night we train. I'd like to think that that's somewhat unique in the Wing Chun world. I'm sure you do some of that as well, but to me, it was a really conscious decision to incorporate that aspect into the school.
Nice. Yes, I agree with you. I wonder, maybe it has more to do with us long-term Wing Chun guys.
Mm-hmm.
We look at Wing Chun as more of a toolbox of useful tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is when and how to use these tools properly, so that way it will accomplish your goal.
Yeah.
And and also considering the fact that in today's world, there's a lot. It's just not about self-defense at the moment. You still have to think about self-defense after all that's been done. Mm-hmm. And the cameras that are out there readily available, the cell phones that, it seems to me like lots of people, instead of stopping something, they'll just go ahead and film. I mean, why not stop the situation or help prevent it from getting any further? But that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, Chaz, I really appreciate your time. And after all this is done, I mean, geez, the last time we actually sat down, that had to have been a few years ago.
Yeah, right? We need to do it again.
Yes, for sure. I now work in Seattle. I mean, not at the moment, but I work down that way. So I can probably make a day and go visit you when we're able to.
That sounds good. And I work in Linwood, which is not far from you, I don't think. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we should figure something out. That'd be really great.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, I'll let you go. I thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I hope everything turns out well for your school when all this is said and done. I'm certain you have a really good core group of people that love training with you.
Yeah.
So
Well, same to you. I hope yours makes it through all right. And, be in touch. I think what you're doing is really cool. And I appreciate you thinking of me and giving me a call. And I hope we get to sit down and have actual tea sometime soon.
yes, yeah, for sure. So you take care, Chaz.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.